Hello everyone, my name is Akal and I am a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor, and I happen to help individuals and couples sort of work through sexual challenges that they may confront along their life path. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about the quote unquote sexual superpower of Libra. Now, I think in this particular case with Libra, it's less about how one performs. It's less about how one is like in the sack. It's more with Libra, more about the dynamic between the individuals. So Libra is ruled by Venus. Now Venus it's an energy that's attempting to harmonize. And it does this through, oftentimes through the individual has to start to recognize these sort of polarities that exist in their dynamics. And Libra is magnetic. It'll simply pull situations and people towards you so that you can sort of work through these issues, because it's kind of exemplified with Libra that these polarities become really, really, really obvious. I mean, the symbol for Libra here is scales. So being, again, that the primary function of Venus is to harmonize and to merge. What ends up happening here with Libra, particularly when it's unconscious, and what I mean by unconscious, let's say immature, or a Libra that has chosen to simply not evolve, and that happens. With all the signs, we have individuals who refuse to ever escape the sort of traps of the ego. Now, with Libra, it's about these desires, right? So it's about these desires, again, because Venus is sort of a sensual planet. But in this particular case, it's like, and this is how it differs from Taurus, which is also ruled by Venus. Taurus is more about sort of like the what I value about the material plane, how I physically engage in the material plane, et cetera, et cetera. And it's about the sensory experience. Now, with Libra, it's more about sex. Because it's about Venus as expressed towards the other. So what's interesting here is how Venus, or rather how Libra evolves through these energies of wanting to merge with the other. So it basically shifts from one of being of lust to one of love. And then eventually it starts to evolve into almost like, how do I explain this? Like a perfected love. And what I mean by perfected love, it has to do with how love transforms. So love, when it's egoic, is kind of personal and needy. And as it begins to transform, it becomes that sort of more universal characteristic of, what is universal love? Like, I love you and you love me because I recognize within you that which is within me. That energy which animates my existence animates your existence. And that is love, which is the signature of our solar system. The sun is that love and that wisdom, and those are the rays that come out across our solar system and that we're ultimately aspiring to. So with Libra, when they're immature, the function is kind of selfish. I know a lot of Libras that think very highly of themselves. They think all sorts of things about themselves. My glasses seem crooked. One of the things I find interesting about Libras is that, to me, they're always like selfish hedonists. And, that's my judgment when they're immature. Now, the reality is they kind of are selfish hedonists when they're young and immature, because what they're doing is they need to gain experiences. So sex and relationships become a thing of fulfilling karma. There's a reason that Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn is exalted in Libra because Saturn, quote unquote, the Lord of Karma, is here to bring about judgment. It's here to bring about, justice. And it's here to bring about discipline. And it's here to bring about all those things that we need to gain objectivity in life. So the Lord of Karma, and karma in general, is this sort of cause and effect, action, reaction. So with Libra on an instinctual level, immature level, they enter into relationships and sexual dynamics instinctually. And that instinctually when they enter, what ends up being created is conflict. But because Libra is so immature at this point, what ends up happening is the individual, they feel totally out of balance unless they win. They have to be victorious and they have to win. They always want to win. And so I've had this interaction several times with like what I would consider immature Libras, in which they want to win the dynamic. There's not a lot of give and take in this situation, but there's a shit ton of drama. So, I'm sure any Libras watching this who can reflect back on their life, you can see where you jumped into things and created dramas, right? Now, what ends up happening though, so it's interesting because all this drama that gets created, this is where the growth occurs, right? So humanity progresses, we grow, unfortunately or fortunately, through sort of Saturnian, ramifications, which are pain, fear, and suffering. So pain, fear, and suffering come at the Libra individual as experienced through relationship dynamics and sexual dynamics. So as they become more objective, there's a tension that begins to build. And it's the tension that comes from the recognition of polarities. The polarity specifically with Libra is this oscillation between the higher self and the lower self. What does my personality want versus what does my soul want? And so this tendency to want to merge with individuals and people and social situations, that doesn't change. But there's a pause. There's a pause that comes about these individuals' lives. And you could say perhaps this pause really becomes noticeable right around an individual Saturn's return, which would be approximately between the age of 28 to 32, somewhere in that range. You might all of a sudden be like, hey, I need to slow down. I'm creating all sorts of drama and conflict, and this is not good. So what ends up happening with Libra at this point is they gain a little bit of objectivity. And with this gain in objectivity, they can start to see how this polarity starts to play out. And they start to search out for the soulmate. This soulmate is interesting because, again, when I'm talking about soulmate, I'm not always talking about sort of relationships. It also could be, I like to think of soulmate as like even the right career path, or you work with the right people, etc. They're like your soulmates. They're there to help you facilitate the recognition of your deepest desires. Those soul level desires that are here, that you're here to fulfill on some level. So with Libra, let's see what I'm trying to say here. So what I was mentioning before this, I guess the big difference here is with the objectivity is they start to see, based on their past experiments, what worked for them and didn't work for them. And this can apply sexually too, is, I did XYZ, I had, these straight experiences, gay experiences, whatever the experiences are, those things worked for me or they didn't work for me or whatever it is. But the other thing that's interesting is you got to keep in mind that Libra's polarity is Aries. So there is a warlike tendency with Aries. And I mentioned with the personality level of Libra, when they're, again, instinctual and immature, they like to kind of like win. Now, what ends up happening here, though, is different. As they become objective, it becomes less about winning. It becomes about give and take. It becomes about the recognition that you and I are one, right? So there's a cyclical pattern. There's a cycle of energy between the two individuals. And you can see how I affect and impact that person also impacts me. And so you start to move towards a balance. And again, balance and harmony, these are terms for Libra. Now, Libra, as it becomes the ultimate expression of Libra here, is you move entirely away from lust. Excuse me, you move almost entirely away from this sort of like personal neediness around these personal concepts of love. and you move more towards universal love. Now, universal love starts to express on a broader level here. Libra starts to look a little like Aquarius. And what do I mean by that? I mean that all of a sudden it's about recognizing human interactions on a much broader scale. So you can find individuals become much more diplomatic. They become, again, what they're attempting to do is they're attempting to, create new social structures. And again, this is why I say it's a bit like Aquarius. It's out of the old is birthed anew. And so Libra is all about experimenting with social dynamics and what works and what doesn't work. So at the point of a mature Libra, they can say, these social dynamics over here, these social structures, these systems, they don't serve us correctly anymore. I've been there, done that. I've seen how humanity's been there, done that. And so out of this comes the possibility of new archetypes, new ways of organizing and structuring human dynamics and human relation. So, it's, like I said, this was actually, Libra was really hard for me to understand, partially because I guess I'm an introvert. So, I don't always look, and I'm a Pisces as well. So I don't necessarily look at social dynamics. For me, it's always about spirit and God. And, I hate to say it, but a lot of the stereotypes by Pisces are very true. So again, that's what I find most interesting about Libra is that, again, it's this sort of, this ultimate expression. It's a bit like Libra starts to make love with humanity. And that is their sexual superpower, is that lust and that drive they had when they were immature becomes mature. And it's like that sexual energy becomes transmutated. And along with all that, the wisdom and the love of humanity comes forth. And then that graciousness and that sort of brightness that Libra always has. Libra is always bright, always gracious. Now, the thing that happens is it's not a mask. When they were young, it was a mask and it was BS, just a little bit BS. Now, as they're older, that love and that graciousness takes on this form of uniting people. And this is where, you get these true concepts of unity that flow from this particular kind of energy. So, with all that said, hopefully you've enjoyed my analysis of Libra and its kind of quasi-sexual superpower. Thank you much.